for this. All right, let's get to our panel to talk about today. Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker are with us this afternoon. Very good afternoon to you. Look, I want to start on the banking inquiry because it does seem to be gathering even more steam. I was mentioning earlier this Financial Review report that Lou O'Brien, he's a Nationals MP from Queensland, has told colleagues he will cross the floor on this. George Christensen has already done the same, already made it clear that's what he'll do. He's just launched an online petition for it's called bankinquiry.com.au. Check it out yourself. Spells out why it's needed and urges people to sign up to the petition to get an inquiry off the ground. Grahame, they're not letting up on this. Where's this going to end?
Well, we've got a couple of people who have been in the parliament for 2 minutes who have become blinking experts on everything. Look, those of us who have been around royal commissions knows what's going to happen here. And I can tell them because people come to me. There will be an orange grower from Leeton. There will be a cattleman just outside of Canberra. There will be a macadamia fellow from up at Mullumbimby. These sort of people will come and will want to have their grievances aired. Now, at the end, and this will take years and years and years, and at the end of it, people will say, well, look, that's not fair, but it's not illegal what the bank did. It might not be fair in the eyes of those who think they've been dudded, but the banks, you know, in those areas have not acted improperly. And you think, righto, well, this is going to go on for another, you know, whatever it is, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, a Royal Commission, when it hears all of these. And at the end of it, you think, well, maybe the government was right in the first place, and that's just get stuck into it and do some stuff, which is what they've been trying to do.
Is the government's argument, though, I don't know, I hear what you're saying, Royal Commissions go on, and sometimes they don't produce much. They did hold one, though, into things like pink bats. They did hold one into union misconduct. And I don't know, did they produce? Were they worth it? Those Royal Commissions?
But it's a specific thing. Pink bats was a few people got killed in attics and in ceilings.
But we knew that, and
you could sort that out.
That was covered in previous inquiries, and.
Yeah, but you could sort that out. It was a discrete area. You want to have a look at all the banking activities. Just imagine, David, how long that's going to last and how many people will want their grievances heard. And I still think at the end of it, you cannot legislate for what's fair.
And look, Bruce, Lou O'Brien, who's agreed apparently to cross the floor on this, he's done so because he's negotiated an extra term of reference, and it's, you know, an entirely reasonable one. Discrimination by insurance companies against people with mental health issues. But look, you could have an entire inquiry just on that, right? By the time you explore how every customer of an insurance company who's got a mental health issue has been treated, you know, that's just one example of what Graham's saying here. This thing, if it's looking at every customer that every insurance company and then every customer that every bank and, you know, this could go on and on and on.
Oh, look, it could, and that's up to the Royal Commissioners to make sure that the various references that they're given are properly contained and examined, just like they did with the sexual assault, the Royal Commission that they've just, I think, is still going.
The child sexual abuse.
Yeah. So these things are manageable, but you know, you've got to make sure that you've got the proper resources to look after them, that you've got the staff to conduct the proper inquiries and investigations, and the Royal Commissioners to do the work. But look, let's not be in any doubt that this is a response to what happened on the weekend. Christensen and this O'Brien guy, both Queensland LNP members of Parliament, who are now absolutely driven and focused on getting this Royal Commission up in a way that I know Christensen was talking about beforehand, but now he's really shown his hand in a way that I don't think would have happened had the LNP not been belted out of the park on Saturday night in the Queensland elections.
There's another thing too, Grahame, and it's not just Queensland, but it's the same-sex marriage result. I know others have written this as well, but there is a view among some in the Nationals that earlier in the year, remember, they put up the plebiscite, it got rejected by the Parliament to have a plebiscite into same-sex marriage, and yet still you had, you know, whether it's Warren Ench, Trevor Evans, Trent Zimmerman, and Tim Wilson still agitating and, you know, reported threats to cross the floor and so on, keep the issue alive, and eventually got a postal survey and a yes result. I'm not saying this is the right interpretation. There are some in the Nats who think, well, hang on, they were allowed to use this pressure of crossing the floor to keep the issue alive and get what they wanted?
Yeah, look, I understand that, but what did surprise me is that a lot in the National Party, in other words, the fellas they're sitting next to, put their hand up and said yes to same-sex marriage too. And in the end, surprisingly, so did the National Party electorates. That's the bit that surprised me. I thought it was they'd be much stronger opposed. Yeah, look, I can understand a couple of these fellas are nervous, but if they had any common sense, they'd think it through and realise, OK, look at me, I got a Royal Commission. Is it going to be ready by my time my grandkids are ready to bank? It'll take a long time.
Let's get to the Queensland result then, Bruce. You know, we saw those figures coming in Saturday night. Doesn't look like towards the close of counting today, you know, the bigger picture has changed much. Labor's still on track to win government. Is that your assessment of it now? Just a question of whether they get to a majority or not.
Well, as we asserted on Saturday night, Labor looks set to form government. It certainly will form a government. It's a question of whether it will form a majority government in its own right. And I went through the numbers again this afternoon, and I can see them easily getting to the magic number of 47. And that would just mean them picking up about 3 seats that the LNP will lose, seats like Gavin, Aspley, Redlands, and them holding on to a couple of seats that they didn't think they were going to hold on to, like Mundingborough. So all that, I think, points to Labor getting about 47, One Nation getting maybe 1 or 2 seats, and the Katter Party getting 2, and then the LNP getting about 40. So I think Palaszczuk will be able to govern in her own right. And even if she doesn't govern in her own right, she doesn't have to do any deals. All she has to do is go into the Parliament and say, I've got 45, 46 votes, clearly the largest block of votes in the Parliament. I move confidence in me as the Premier. And you watch them, they'll all fall in behind her from the crossbenches without having to do any deal.
That wouldn't be a breach of her election promise then, in your view?
No, not at all. She's not doing any deals with anyone.
What do you reckon? Would that? It's not a deal, as Bruce says.
Look, if she gets 48, it doesn't matter. If she gets 47 and it's tied and she's relying on them, you know, under her own rules, she can't go to a couple and say, "Will you guarantee me supply?"
47.
That would be a deal. She's not making a deal.
Right, we'll say she's on 46, and
well, if she got 46, she's in huge trouble.
Would she need? Would that be a deal?
You know, if she's fair income,
a deal. If you said,
if she's fair income,
just the confidence.
No, if she's fair income, you know, she can test it, but it just means you've got the massive instability that she was talking about, because she cannot guarantee anything, because she, on her own word, she cannot do any deals.
She has Bruce, no trouble on this one, David, I can tell you. She's got at least two Katter MPs who have been supporting her on most legislative measures in the last government. She's got an independent from Noosa who has got no affiliation, as I understand, to the LNP. And then she's got the One Nation people who may do what they like. But she won't have any difficulty in forming a government and being able just to go to the governor and say, I had a motion of support passed in the Parliament, and that will stay until such time as someone puts up a motion of no confidence in me, which could happen to any government any time. I think she's in a strong position.
What about the LNP? Stay merged, split apart again. This debate inevitably follows any LNP loss in Queensland. What do you reckon?
I wasn't big on the merger in the first place. I think the Liberal Party always needs somebody on their right flank, and normally that's the National Party. But you can't unscramble the egg. Look, the big story out of the night was One Nation. Now, I don't know whether it's political naivety or it's just one of the biggest dingo acts I've ever seen in politics. But One Nation, supposedly representing country people, has handed Queensland a Labor government. Now, if they do that federally, it's going to be very uncomfortable in the metaphorical Bill Shorten bed, where you've got Bill Shorten, Pauline Hanson, Richard Di Natale, all in the same bed, all working against the coalition. Because effectively, That is what One Nation is doing. They are taking votes of very good country people, and they're only giving back about 55% of them. So they are transferring votes to the Labor Party. How does the Coalition
overcome that? I mean, does it require a preference deal to get those preferences back?
No, it doesn't. But I do think that somebody's got to sit down with One Nation and say, look, do you really want to deliver Labor governments around this country? Because you've delivered 2 so far. Do you want to try for more? Is that really what you want? In which case, we will paint you as the Labor Party stooge. Now, that sounds odd, but that's what's happening. Yeah. They are transferring votes from the Coalition
Bruce,
to the Labor Party.
That's technically right. That split the Conservative vote.
Well, they have, but then the Conservatives have to look to their own house for that, not go around blaming One Nation voters for that, which is what Graham's seems to be doing there. Now, people in One Nation, people who vote One Nation, are doing it because they're disillusioned with the Conservative Party and that they want to see things happen. And, and that's, of course, why these 2 blokes are suddenly coming out and talking about a Bank Royal Commission, as if One Nation voters wouldn't support that. Of course they do. They want to see, the insiders cop it. And the people who have been exploiting them, in their view, for so long through the banking system, exposed. So you have to look to your own house, Graham, when this happens and ask yourself, why is it that these people who were once rusted on Conservative voters aren't voting for me anymore? Now, Labor has to look to its own house too, because some of them are
their votes down too.
Are Labor supporters as well, but nowhere near as much as the LNP. The LNP lost 7%, I think, across the state.
Well, yeah, but the seat that One Nation looks set to win, Morani, was a Labor-held seat. So there you go. Just before we leave this, Graham, would you stick with Tim Nicholls as the LNP leader?
Well, yeah, I don't think there's anyone saying, hey, I would have done a better job. I think he was a bit fluffy on the One Nation thing, and he almost proved what the Labor Party was saying, and that is, look, One Nation is dangerous, and he was pussyfooting around. I thought it was silly. But yes, I do. I think a losing leader ought to stay there for a while and wear the heat, and then we'll see in about 18 months' time, 2 years' time, if he's still the leader.
We will indeed. Graham, Bruce, good to see you both. We'll catch up next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, quick break, and we'll be back with the last word.